Okay, we're back. Welcome to episode 6 of Art of the Experience. I am really excited for our guest today, and thank you for waiting. Everyone's being patient. It's been a long time since I've had one of these, but I couldn't pass up this opportunity to talk to this designer. You might not know his name right off the bat, but I guarantee you, if you're watching this show, you know his work. I'm here today with Robin Hall. Hello.
Hello.
I'm honored to be able to speak to you. I've grown up seeing your artwork at Knott's Berry Farm and designs and all the stuff that you've created, but I had no idea who did this. But I'm very familiar with it. Now that I take my kids to Knott's Berry Farm as often as I do, I'm actually looking at the designs of the architecture and the little details of Knott's Berry Farm, probably more than I'm watching my kids. So I need to learn how to balance those two. But right off the bat, thank you for everything you've done. Please, can you tell us about yourself? Tell us about how you started at Knott's and what your role was and all the fun stuff you did.
Well, my career has really started at Magic Mountain, and the people that I worked for at Magic Mountain um, migrated down to Knott's Berry Farm. Terry Van Gorder and Larry Frack, who was head of construction, and a few other people. And they knew my work as art director at Magic Mountain. And so they convinced me to come down to work on Camp Snoopy as a project. The guy who was running design at that point, a fellow named John Pugh, came up to my house with 3 slide carousels, um, and of all these different children's parks he'd looked at all over the world in the U.S., etc. And he sat in my dining room showing these slides, and I hadn't even committed that I was going to go. Nuts at this point. And because it was a long drive for me at that point. And so he kind of convinced me to come down, and I went down and talked to the HR people and got a tour around, and it looked like a nice place to work. And I said yes.
So you took a look at the footprint because Camp Snoopy used to be a parking lot, right? Just kind of like next to Montezuma's Revenge.
Yeah. It was a parking
And
lot, had beautiful trees on it, which we tried to save.
yeah, I'm really glad you saved them
Yeah.
because even today, it's a real forest over there.
Yeah. Well, Walter Knott was really fond of landscape. And in this particular parking lot, he had all these things from jacarandas to oaks to, whatever. And Harry Van Gorder had this idea of doing an Adirondack camp. This is before the Peanuts characters were involved in this at all. And he'd been at the Iwani, and I had too. And so he was telling me he liked the architecture of the Iwani and um, log architecture. And it just seemed like fun to me. So I started drawing this. And I was working with a very diverse group of people. One of them was John Kasparowicz, who had done a lot of work for Knott's before and on the architectural side. He came in. Eddie Sato was there at that time.
Eddie's amazing.
Um, yeah. And we just started drawing things. And um, Terry wanted a bunch of little children's rides because his belief and his philosophy was that children really bring their parents to the park. So you can market to the parents, but it's really, if you market to the children, then you're sure to get the parents to come along with them. And most of the children's stuff at Knott's at that point was across the Buena Park on the other side around the
Hmm.
lake, and it was kind of falling apart. And so it was just a matter of trying to figure out what rides they liked and the trains, and we wanted a petting zoo. And Terry really thought the stagecoach was important to Knott's, and it would be fun if it went through this Adirondack camp. But the only way to do it was to bring it up on a trestle.
Yeah, the elevated stagecoach. It's almost like the Knott's Berry Farm People Mover, because it's so elevated. And I always tell people, I'm like, the stagecoach at Knott's is still one of the best attractions in Southern California. Like, they could spend all this money on Galaxy's Edge, but there's something really cool about being on that stagecoach. I'm glad they kind of emphasized it to loop around this.
Yeah. Well, the idea of taking horses up in the air like that
Yeah, that's outside the
was a
box.
little was pretty challenging, yes. And I learned a lot about how to control a stagecoach and uh, how to keep the wheels from shattering by going against the fence and all that kind of stuff, and how long it took uh, to break a stagecoach and what kind of incline the horses could do, all that strange stuff that you learn.
I would never have thought of that. Yeah, that's amazing. So, Knott's has definitely changed its Camp Snoopy over the years, but I have vivid memories of it as a kid. I was 5 years old when it opened, and it's celebrating 40 years this summer, which is I can't believe it.
Right.
I don't have them anymore, but I feel like they would still be in my mom's cabinet. The Camp Snoopy glasses from McDonald's that they opened to kind of coincide with the
Right.
opening. But it was Camp Snoopy was a big deal, and they had the riverboat that went around the Cordelia Knot, which is
Right.
sadly that's not there anymore, and they've moved some stuff
Yeah.
around. But one of the things I remember the most is almost like a second level of Camp Snoopy that had the suspension bridge, the old fun
Right.
house. Tell me about that whole area. That part was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, uh, we wanted to kind of replicate the mountains and have as much as possible a multi-level experience, but it was also driven by it was only 4 acres. And so we stretched out, took Reflection Lake, had the Cordelia Cay go around, but that ship was already falling apart. So we had another one, the Walter Cay built. Um,
Was that the same ship that was across the street? Did they move it over, or was it a different one?
yeah, the Cordelia Cay was across the street and they moved it over.
Oh wow.
And its death was eventually in the boardwalk area underneath the corkscrew. There was a lake there and they put it there as kind of a prop and it just sank.
I had
So,
no idea. Oh my gosh.
but um, the Walter Cay kept going for quite a while. Um, but the elevation that you were talking about came about because the land was so tight and we wanted a train ride to go around and try and make the land feel bigger and more expansive. And so you didn't have that much room to stretch out, going up and over and staging the balloon ride so it looked like something bigger and more important up on a little hill was good. Plus, we wanted more of the rock work and waterfalls to make the landscape more dramatic.
It's still one of the most picturesque views of Knott's Berry Farm. There's a bridge
Yeah,
that kind of looks towards the Grizzly Creek Lodge that now they theme
right.
it up every holiday season or whatnot, but like the river going by there. And I even noticed on one of those bridges, there's almost like a face out of the stonework. Like it's a little hidden
Uh-huh.
kind of, like if you know to look for it, it's there. And I always like to point it out to
Yeah,
people, and they're like, I had no idea that was there. I'm like, it's been there for 40 years. And but it's
right.
that's part of the charm of Knott's Camp Snoopy is that even like the lamp fixtures, they're the cutout designs of the squirrels or the different
Yeah,
woodsy creatures. Like it's all over Camp Snoopy. It's really great.
yeah. I did the squirrels, and the landscape architect that I hired, Dennis Kurtz, is no longer with us, did a lot of the birds, and he was a really talented landscape architect. And so we worked together on the bridge design and the fences, and that bridge that was up by the playhouse has this sort of tooth that's hanging down on the two eye holes in the bridge that originally lit up at night, and
Oh, they did.
the
Oh, they
water
didn't do
ran
that again.
underneath it. Yeah,
Oh, that's so
yeah,
great.
and we had barrel bridges and the suspension bridge. A lot of what Terry's philosophy was, who was really my mentor in all of this, was um, to have these places be very interactive. Um, Places like Magic Mountain were mostly about the thrill rides, and um, he thought you needed a much more of a balance between the cerebral and the visceral um, things. So he wanted things that were really active that you could play with as well as think about, and um, he really drove it.
I remember as a kid, there was like a place to throw trash away. And
That's
I'm
right.
sad it's not there, but when I walk by it today where it was, I think about this thing that was there. And it's just like you're saying,
Right.
it's interactive, but it's just
Right.
throwing a piece of trash away. But it was like it was a thing.
Yeah. That was added later by um, my design manager, Tracy Caviola, at that point. And she sculpted that little bear. And then it was then sculpted on a larger scale by Joe Medionian.
Oh, I love hearing these names. I think that's so great to hear all this stuff. One of the things
Yeah.
that I noticed on your website was the side elevation drawings of the Grizzly Creek Lodge. And
Right.
as a kid, I looked at that as like the height of sophistication of dining, and now I kind of laugh to myself when I go in there because yes, we have the food plan at Knott's, so we're there quite a bit. And they actually have really good pizza in this place
Right.
still. But my kids can't wait to just it's like an adventure for them to go up the stairs and sit in that top level of it. Tell me a little bit about the Grizzly Creek
Right.
Lodge because it's it seems more than it is, but it's charming.
Well, it was um, at that point I was still working for John Pugh, and this was like the first or second building that John Pugh had ever uh, drawn up the plan for. Um, I drew the elevations, and then along with John Kasparowicz, and we had Randall Duell do the drawings. But it was a jigsaw puzzle because we had to go over the roots of the big sycamore tree out front. And so we were doing these bridge footings. And so the plan that John had come up with, because he did the floor plan, was really kind of convoluted. You can see on these diagrams here. It was a bunch of sort of buildings that were kind of stuck together. And then with my elevations, I tried to tie it together and make it feel rustic and do all the light fixtures. And, these are the things we're talking about. All this stuff I drew. I got in love with log architectures. That was my
Oh yeah.
play because I really like toys and things.
What's really funny about this is there was one area of the park. It's the one that's closest to La Palma. There was a little log cabin that was built there, and I'm not even kidding. That is the first time I ever experienced a computer. Was inside it because it was like they had these Apple IIe's on display for people to learn on, and I'm just like, I
Oh yeah,
what a vital part of global civilization. And I discovered that at Camp Snoopy because
right.
they just happened to have some computers there. I think that is just absolutely fantastic.
Well, again, that was an idea of Terry's because he was always looking to what the future was, whether it was looking towards the Pacific Rim or technology or the new wave of dinosaurs coming that were in all the Time magazines and things like that. And that particular case, the Inventor's Workshop, we call it,
That's
um,
right.
he thought that the way of the future was all of these little computers. And I have to say, I wasn't all that convinced,
It's just a
but
fad.
it was fun to do. It was fun to do that building, and that particular log cabin was really a veneered log cabin. We built a shell and then it half logs and trimmed it out so it looked more like a log cabin.
You had a really good segue to dinosaurs, but I'm gonna try to resist because we have to talk a little bit about my all-time favorite attraction. That an attraction that I'm still traumatized that I was told I was too tall for. Do you know what I'm talking about?
But I'm not sure because there are a lot of
The
places.
Huff and Puff. The Huff and Puff. It's so funny. Like I mentioned it to my mom, and my mom was even like, "Oh yeah, you were really upset when you were told you were too tall." Because I'm 6'2" now, so I probably grew faster than some other kids at that age. But I was like, the Huff and Puff is the greatest attraction ever. And even to this day, I'm like, why isn't there an adult Huff and Puff? Like it's
Right.
just one of those things that I want to see, I want to have. And with my kiddos, I noticed I had them check. I'm like, hey guys, just so you know, you're 4 inches away from not being able to ride this ever again. And they're kind of like, so what, Dad? Like, let's go on Jaguar. Let's go do something else. Which so they're starting to discover the roller coasters. But one thing I have to mention, it's they don't call it Woodstock's Airmail. My kids call it the Up and Down Ride,
Right.
and I've probably watched my kids on that 1,000 times, right? And they still love it. All of them still go on it, and I showed them the designs on your website for the side elevation of it. I'm like, hey,
Right.
check this out, and they're like, that's the Up and Down Ride. I'm like, yeah, isn't that awesome? Like, I love that I get to share this with them.
Uh-huh.
But what's funny is that now they're tall enough to go on Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout, and the way I sold it to them was, you like the Up and Down Ride, right? This is like the grown-up Up and Down Ride with Guardians, and so now I'm gonna just eat up your segue to go to Kingdom of the Dinosaurs because
Okay.
that was a big deal. Kingdom of the Dinosaurs, when they opened that, I felt that that really elevated Knott's Berry Farm to be, it's always a competition with Disneyland. And I would always say, I consider Knott's to be like almost like the third park. Like if you're coming down to California, do not miss Knott's Berry Farm. Tell me about Kingdom of the Dinosaurs.
It was really different in those days too, because it was much more about sort of history and um, more. I mean, it was less about roller coasters. Now with Cedar Fair coming in there and putting roller coasters everywhere, it's
Oof,
gotten closer to the Magic Mountain model. But
right.
um, then it was really about storytelling.
I'm always nervous about Ghost Town going away for some reason because there's a big roller coaster through it. And at least with Ghost Rider, that fits the theme. Silver Bullet comes really close to like taking over, but at least it's a great ride. But yeah, that's one of those things. Is like you got to respect Knott's that the history that's there and like some of that stuff. It's so ancient. I would be heartbroken if they got rid of it for another big metal coaster.
Well, it was when we got there, it was dying because they'd taken out most of the artisans that were working there. And so we had uh, after Knott's, we did, I think it was Ghost Town Alive, is what we called it. And we brought in UPS workers and turned them into blacksmiths and glass blowers and
Oh my gosh.
stained glass workers and taught them a spiel. A friend of mine, Marilyn Brody, wrote a bunch of scripts for them, and they learned those. And after the first week, they were making up their own stories and became in the character. It was fun.
Oh, I love that, and that definitely
And
kind of continues on today. For not Kingdom of the Dinosaurs, I mean, first of all, having to replace Berry Tales, which it's kind of interesting because I love Berry Tales. I remember it vividly, and I'm glad it came back in a different form. But it's weird. I feel like it has to be almost has to have like 30 years in between it for it to be like nostalgic and remembered in a certain way because it
right,
did look very dated, right? It didn't look timeless.
yeah,
It looked Raleigh Crump is incredible and he has a style, but it's similar to Mary Blair where it looks like the 60s and 70s, right? That doesn't
right.
look modern, and especially you're getting to the early 90s. Dinosaurs, like tell us about that.
Maybe another 30 years, the dinosaurs will come back.
I think they should actually when they did bring back when they brought back Fairy Tales that's there now, since it's screens, you could do a dinosaur version, just get a new program in or switch it up. But I wouldn't be surprised, but
Right.
hopefully Fairy Tales stays a while.
Well, this came about again by Terry. I think there was a Time magazine article on dinosaurs and how they figured this is how they were walking, and they didn't drag their tail on the ground like in all of the uh, prehistoric movies of that time. And he came into the conference room where I was working and was carrying a stack of about 20 books and dropped them on the table in there and said, I want an attraction about dinosaurs. And
Just because of one article, one Time magazine article, is responsible
yeah,
for
but
King
he
of the
was
Dinosaurs.
he was always looking for what the future was. And
Well, Jurassic Park. This was ahead of that, right?
yeah, and I was his wrist and drew a lot of things. But it originally started out as an outdoor attraction in his mind. He was going to have a very lush garden and have the dinosaurs uh, appear out of the bushes and reach out to the people as they were walking around.
Where would that have been?
Well, it was at that point it was underneath uh, the end of the boomerang, um, just off of Charleston Circle. We were always trying to put something there. That's where Cordelia Cay sank. There was a lake there, and so we were going to do build a cave, and so people could kind of walk through the cave and have some animatronics in there. And there was a company called Dynamation at that time, and they were marketing dinosaurs. And so we thought we'd just buy a bunch of these and set them around in the landscape. But it just really wasn't feasible, and they couldn't make enough of the dinosaurs fast enough, and so it was given up for about a week. And then he came back and said, "We're going to take out Fairy Tales and put it in that building and have a dark ride."
Oh man.
And this was about 6 months out from when he wanted to open it.
Oh my gosh.
And at that point, uh, Lane Hauser was working with us. I don't think Bobby Brooks was, but Fred Hope was around, Fred Hope Jr. And he was mocking up a model of this, and I was drawing what the scenes would be, and Lane was also drawing up things. I'd started on it before Lane, but I was trying to put her in charge of it because there were a lot of other things going on. We were trying to do a Knott's Berry Farm um, in Japan or something at that point. Also,
Okay, we need
but
to hear about that. What? Okay, I can't go away from that
yeah,
one.
there were we tried to do it all over the place, but
Oh, that's so awesome.
later it became more either Knott's or Camp Snoopy and something, trying to get those going around the world. But anyway, we started with drawings before we started with a storyline. It was just kind of, well, we're going to go back in time and see the dinosaurs. And so we did this exhibit, and I think it was Fred had this idea of going through an inventor's
Oh
workshop
yes.
sort of thing. And Lane uh, said, "Well, that's been done all the time. Let's have it go through this workshop. Let's have the cleaning lady knock over this thing and send you back in time." And so um, we didn't think about it too much. We just did that, and we followed the Rolly Cramps track design. And so there's a little bump there, and so we made a porthole and
Mm-hmm.
had crackle neon arches around it. So it kind of gave you that sense that you went back in time. So um, I was researching what the customs of cavemen were because we were going to go back through the caveman sort of era and have saber-toothed cats and whatever. And I like to do little sculptures, so I was sculpting uh, the cavemen and cavewomen and all that kind of stuff. And
That's
that
so
that
cool.
was really fun for me.
It seems like a solid history lesson. Do you know what I mean? Like it rides like that make Knott's Berry Farm feel a little bit like Epcot Center in a way, where there's more. It's more than just a ride. Like I probably as a kid learned about dinosaurs from that ride too, right? Uh,
Yeah.
Another thing that really makes Knott's Berry Farm kind of feel on that Epcot level was Mystery Lodge. And Mystery Lodge is one of those attractions that we never really got to say goodbye to. It's not there anymore. The building's there, and it's almost like urban legend of why is it gone? When's it coming back? People miss it for sure, and it won a Thea Award. Can you talk a little bit about Mystery Lodge?
I didn't know it was gone, but that's sad.
Oh yeah, sorry to break
Uh,
the news to you. It's there. I've
yeah,
heard things of. there's a part of the projector that's broken and they can't get it. And I've heard different reasons, but yeah, it's just sitting there. It's not open, unfortunately.
Something it was in Jeffrey's barn originally, which was we were thinking was going in Jeffrey's barn anyway at that point, which was an old boxing arena that Walter Knott had gotten somewhere, and we wanted this attraction to kind of play off the idea of cowboys and Indians to help market Knott's again and sort of broaden the appeal again. And um, Terry was very much about telling stories, as was Bob Rogers, who we'd linked up with, and Terry had seen what Bob had done at um, Canadian World's Fair thing. It was marketing, I can't remember, GM cars or something like that, and they had this similar kind of technology doing that. He wanted to bring it to the park and have an Indian storyteller or a Native American storyteller
Hmm.
tell a nice family story.
It's perfect for knots. And I still quote it to my friends, the whole, oh, Raven, and like there's these lines that it just soaked its way into pop culture that if you've grown up with that stuff. And in fact, I think it was Mystery Lodge that opened the summer I worked there. My first job ever. I made 4.25 an hour and I was a sweeper at Knott's Berry Farm. And I feel like, and all I got was this T-shirt because they were giving out a Mystery Lodge T-shirt, and I found it, and I have it, and I've actually worn it to Knott's a few times, and a couple of people were like, "Where did you get that ancient shirt?" Because I think this is '95 or '94. It was a while ago, but I still wear it
Yeah,
when it's kept in a box for a couple of decades. It still looks good. But
yeah,
so Mystery Lodge must have opened around the same time as Bigfoot Rapids because that was a pretty big popular expansion too. Were you a part of that?
yeah. I was part of that too. Well, I mean, just going back to Mystery Lodge for a second,
Oh yeah.
it was a combined effort between uh, the Knott's group and Bob Rogers Imagination Arts, and it was a very complex project because we were trying to get rid of a lot of the production of the jams and jellies off the farm and removing it somewhere else. And um, there was very little room to do this. And again, crazy short time to do it. And or Bigfoot Rapids was being built, and we needed a big reservoir for that. So we were just finished doing the reservoir when Terry came in with this idea and wanted to do this. But we only had enough land to do just the attraction. We didn't have enough land to do the queuing for it. So we had to build it over the top of the reservoir.
Oh wow.
And um, I kept wondering what Bob Rogers was doing with this project because he'd come in and show drawings of like the pre-show area, and it was very flat and kind of just barely dimensional, and it was sort of stylized and didn't go with the my idea of how you present Native American culture, which I thought, very dimensional and
Mm-hmm.
carved and all this kind of stuff, which I was working on the building side and the retail side and the exterior of it. We were working with Native Americans working all this. And I thought, if you present this stuff to them, they're not going to get it. And he sold it by saying that the whole idea to lower the expectations for Mystery Lodge, and the way he decided to do that was to have all the interior be very simplistic and stylized with cutout pine trees and a backlit moon that was sitting up there, and have everybody sit on this carpeted floor and have uh, um, the local guide, kind of dressed as a forest ranger, start telling you the story, and the doors magically opened behind you, and in you walked and sat on these wood benches, and there was an old man standing on the stage, and he started to tell you this story about being sort of closer to death and having the raven talk to him, and it just became a very kind of magical moment that was very um, uplifting. And many people remember it, like you were saying, as really a highlight of Knott's. It was amazing to me because I knew a little bit about the technology, but I really had no idea what it took to make that kind of stuff work and kind of make things disappear and come back. And
It's still impressive if you think about it. You know, it's such
yeah,
a, a timeless type of illusion that goes back forever, right? It's
yeah,
Pepper's Ghost, but it's a more advanced version of that, right? Um,
right, right,
but it elevated Knott's Berry Farm to be less Six Flags, more Disneyland. It's like that type
yeah,
of entertainment, but it's feel good. It had a little bit of magic to it, and you literally left going, "How did they do that?" Like
yeah.
you just don't know.
My worry is that it wasn't a projector piece they couldn't find anymore, but it was just the cost of running the show because there were a lot of actors involved, even though you only saw one.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't think about that. Yeah, I'm sure it couldn't be too cheap, but I hear people asking about it all the time, and hopefully one day it comes back. A couple of years ago, they used it for Not Scary Farm, where they did a really neat presentation in there that was like a scary type of like I mean, they used the technology. I forget exactly what it was or what it was called, but they were summoning spirits from this book, and the spirits were coming out, and it was a really cool use. It makes me wonder, like, if we can't do Mystery Lodge as it was, I've always wondered about, can they rework this? Because that whole area isn't Pacific Northwest anymore. They changed Bigfoot Rapids to be part of Ghost Town, so it's like a
right,
calico exploration kind of river rafting. It did finally
right.
get a Bigfoot animatronic, which is weird. You know, it's Bigfoot Rapids didn't have one, but now that they changed the name, there's your Bigfoot animatronic.
They didn't have any money. We didn't have any money in those days,
I
and
swear, as a kid though, I saw it. I'm like, I know it's behind there. Like I hear it.
well, I'd carved it into the hill underneath the waterfall,
Yeah.
and so you could kind of see something
Oh, I totally
if you
remember
really
that.
wanted the payoff.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, you do, because I
yeah.
didn't think anybody ever saw
Oh,
it.
oh yeah. I'm a nerd. I noticed that stuff.
And then we built this tunnel, and we were just pumping it full of fog and saying, it
Yeah, there
was
you go.
Bigfoot was somewhere. And then the guys from the maintenance, then they went out and they built their own semi
Oh
animatronic
man,
and put it in there. It was not very successful.
man, I
And
wonder if I ever saw that.
well, it was taken out of there by management.
Oh, okay.
They did not like it.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think like if they were to take another stab at using the Mystery Lodge space, I wouldn't mind seeing a new take on the Haunted Shack, like or something. Because I was
Right.
devastated when that got removed for a terrible reason.
Yeah.
But like I
Yeah.
could picture maybe using the technology, maybe not. But and especially after driving to Vegas and stopping by the Real Calico, they still have a Haunted Shack. It We need to get that back, and maybe Mystery Lodge is the
Yeah.
place for it. I don't know.
At that point, the management of Cedar Fair was um, pretty anti Knott's history and
Awful. That hurts.
things that were there. I mean, the first things they wanted to do when they came in was to remove the steam train and the stagecoach.
The
And
two most iconic elements. That's like getting rid of the castle at Disneyland.
everybody in the management and all the employees just sort of rose up against them, and they kind of backed off. And but it was a very strange time when they first took over. Those people are no longer part of Cedar Fair, so it's a different world now.
Yeah, for sure. It seems like they get it a lot better. I think Knott's has
Yeah,
been firing on all cylinders lately.
yeah,
With the Boysenberry Festival or even like the Fiesta Village that just opened up. There's so much charm to that, and it's a real like Disney quality level of attention that went everywhere.
right.
Tell me about. Let's go across the street. So Independence Hall, they add a water park. Did you have any involvement in bringing Soak City to life?
I'd originally drawn some plans for a water park over there, but I was tying it with Independence Hall,
Which makes
and
absolute sense. Like I love that. I wish they went that way.
Yeah, and we were calling it, I think, Revolution or something like that, but I can't really remember. It's been a very long time ago. But that was right at the time I was leaving, and they brought in some other designers, R&R, to come in and design that park, and they wanted it more to be based on California surfing. So it was just a different mindset about how to approach projects. But the real thing that we were looking for in the future, and what event, I mean, we thought we were going to uh, be staying at Knott's and expanding the park dramatically, taking over by building some parking garages on the other side. We could take over um, almost the entire rest of the parking lot and build basically our city version of City Walk and put in a hotel and really upgrade it into a Cineplex and tie over to the Buena Park Mall and just make a real hub for Buena Park in that area and expand it, beyond its confines. And um, I really loved this part of the project and designing it all and playing with it. I was working with my former mentor and boss from uh, my days at Magic Mountain, a guy named Tom Sutton, and we were drawing these things, and um, it was just lots of fun.
I noticed that Independence Hall isn't on there. That's shocking. How-
Well, that was one version. There were several versions where one was Independence Hall staying, um, but I don't know where those are anymore. When I left, they just threw away all of the future planning boards that we'd done 5 and 10 years out. Just dumped them in a dumpster.
oh, no respect. That hurts. You know what's fascinating the most to me? Like, of course, it's great to think about expanding across Beach Boulevard, but it looks like there's almost like a Tomorrowland, or there's a future type of area. That seems just like the opposite of Knott's Berry Farm. I love Knott's for like the old time adventures.
Right.
So what a concept to see them try to do something the opposite of that.
Well, it was sort of, yeah, I would say yes, you're right, but it was again looking towards what the future was, and um, like we did a rainforest area, and we were doing this spacewalk area, trying to play off um, more the exploration and the adventures, like how the West was explored, and how man was continuing to explore the universe and how we were,
The final frontier. Hmm.
final frontier. Yeah.
That's great. Is that a people mover or some kind of monorail I see?
That was, yes, it was a monorail route or an elevated tram route, but we were trying to get a monorail.
Wow. It's hard to imagine Knott's Berry Farm with this type of expansion. And did they ever consider leveling the Buena Park Mall? I think probably at the time it was still a hot spot. Buena Park Mall is pretty dead these days.
It was, no, it was suffering even at that time, but it was, the Knott family had very little appetite for um, risk, I guess is the
Hmm.
best way to put it. And Terry had managed to talk them into doing all these different projects from North Camp Snoopy and in Minnesota and at the Mall of America, and they just they were really being dragged reluctantly along with his vision of the future, which I was really happy to be on. Um, and then we did this plan trying to show the Knotts family that they were sitting on this gold mine of potential. The attraction could be twice the size. It could have hotel revenue, and all of this other kind of stuff. And we could have a Cineplex and energize the local community and give more jobs and all this kind of other stuff that doesn't show up on the little drawings that I was doing. Um, and they instead used it to uh, sell the park.
Oh my goodness.
and,
That's
and so
not what it was
they
meant
put
for.
they put it out there to all these different people. Even Disney was looking at it. I was talking with the guys down there about it and how they were uh, planning to bridge over Buena Park and make it much more Americana. And
Well, it's fascinating, and I mean, we've always heard rumors of like maybe Disney's going to buy Knott's Berry Farm one of these days, and when they're talking about Disney's America, that kind of held a feel like Knott's Berry Farm because they had the farm element and stuff.
well, they
But
looked
then,
at it. And,
yeah, I'm sure they considered it, but that's a crazy concept in of itself. Like, wow, this would become that, and ironically enough, when they opened California Adventure, Knott's kind of is the original California Adventure,
right.
the Wild West in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. We thought that was, uh, it just wasn't very successful. And we kind of looked at that and just sort of shook our head because it was like they didn't really go into it fully with,
Hmm.
and then there were a lot of design issues too that I probably shouldn't talk about, but there were proportional things and other things that just seemed really bizarre. And then a few things that seemed like ripoffs, you know, um, their Grizzly Creek kind of ride was um, felt very much like Camp Snoopy architecture and a lot of
Well,
other
even
things.
Grizzly Creek Lodge. I mean, that
Yeah,
alone, it seems very, very similar.
right.
It only cost them $1 billion to fix that mistake, and hopefully you've checked it out lately since they've added Buena Vista Street and it kind of made it more of a throwback than the hip and edgy. DC has really grown on me. I got to help open that park from a entertainment standpoint, but
Right.
it's come a long way. It's hard to believe that the new park is 23 years old already or something like that. But
Yeah.
well, great. What stands out the most about your time at Knott's Berry Farm? Like, what is like your best memories of that place?
Well, it's really the people. They were fun, but it was also the opportunity. I was this uh, know nothing kid is maybe a little bit strong, but I was certainly a very junior person um, coming off of Magic Mountain. I was an art director there, and they just saw something in me that I wasn't seeing.
There's some trust that they had.
Yeah, there was trust, and um, it it worked out. I mean, my first boss was um, helping me even understand kind of architecture. And I said, well, I'm not really sure what you want me to do and how to draw this. And he says, well, you know what a doorknob is, don't you? I said, yeah, well, draw the doorknob and then the door, and then you just keep going.
Baby steps. Yeah.
And um, I kind of survived that. But I mean, part of my favorite part of it was doing things like,
Oh yeah,
Beat,
from Jaguar.
where, Jaguar was just a wonderful project.
That
Uh,
queue is probably still the best at Knott's. I mean, it is. Bud would be impressed with that queue. I'm still
yeah,
impressed with it. You know what I mean? Like it, and
yeah,
you should see what they do now with the projection mapping show on it because they redid Fiesta Village around it. Like
yeah,
you need to see that. It's amazing. Like I don't want to say Disney Sea quality, but it's like there's an area outside of that pyramid that like this is incredible. Like they really did a good job
right,
with it.
yeah. I'd seen the color work that was done. There's a woman at what used to be the head of my group that did the colors for it. She did a beautiful job on
And they shoot fireworks off of it now as part of it. Like it's unexpected. Like they took it
it.
to the
Well,
next level.
yeah, the best thing about the early on opening of Jaguar was that they had this flame effect.
Mm-hmm.
So as you went through the upper part of that, just flames burst
Oh
out,
yeah, I remember. You
and
know what? They use fog now. They still did. They didn't do that for years, but now that it reopened, there's a fog effect
yeah,
that's pretty neat on it.
yeah. Well, it was all about the money and a lot of those things. I mean, there were a lot of ideas, but um, The not resources were very small, and it took. I mean, the most creative thing about that time was probably Terry Van Gorder getting these projects through, because he managed to shepherd them and convince the Knott family to do all this stuff that they didn't really have much interest in. Um, it was a very different time, because each one of the Knott family before Terry got there was running their own uh, portion of the park, and they all had different rules and they had different pay scales, and it
Oh
wasn't a
man.
business. It
Oh,
was just a whole bunch of separate businesses.
well, talk
And he
about
put
mom
it
and
together.
pops. Yeah.
Yeah, and he put it together and made it into something that was um, has stood the test of time. So that's all good.
It's a timeless park. It's a fun place. I can't thank you enough. This has been really cool diving in and finally like talking to the person that's made so much of the stuff that I literally I go there way too often with my family. But it's
Yeah.
nice to finally get a chat and to meet you and talk to you. And what are you doing these days? Like, what are you up to? I see some designs behind you. Are you still designing?
Well, I've been working on a lot of projects for Paramount Parks, and I think there were like 4 different parks that I've designed for them over the past uh, couple of years through a guy named Brandy Hetzel Design, great architect, and just none of them had the quick to get going the full way. Um, so I've been doing that, and I did some work for Busch Gardens in Florida and SeaWorld. And I occasionally do senior housing, and
Wow,
uh,
everything.
I do a little bit of everything. I've worked on a St. John's campus down in Orange, and reworked that so for the future, and so just a lot of strange separate things all happening.
That's why we do what we love. That's so awesome. Well, all right. That's episode 6. Want to thank you very much, Robin Hall. Been an honor to talk to you. Thank you so much. I think on behalf of all the nerds out there, all the designers, we really appreciate all you do, and the passion that you put into it. It definitely shows, and it has held the test of time. So thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
My pleasure.
All right, have a good one. Bye.